Hi, this is Eric from Longbox Review at longboxreview.com. So, a few months ago, I got this idea for this episode and I put it into my calendar and I kept noticing it over the last, several weeks, thinking, I need to prepare for this episode. It's coming up. And then all of a sudden, I looked at my calendar the other day and here it is already. I needed to record this episode and get it out because I'm going to talk about my top 10 favorite comic book couples in celebration of Valentine's Day. Which is kind of a weird proposition for me because I'm not one who actually likes Valentine's Day. I think of it as a manufactured holiday for greeting cards and candy companies. Which, of course, is something that bugs my wife because she loves to be treated, given treats and treated special on any given day. But because it's Valentine's Day, she kind of likes that too. So we've had interesting conversations about that over the years. Regardless, I decided I wanted to try this out just to talk about some of the couples in comic books that I've read over the years. But first, some news. So last episode, which was my Breaking Late News episode, I released that. And then Marvel and DC decided to, in recent weeks, throw out some bombshells. And so I kind of wanted to talk about those. And then I'll get into my favorite couples. So first up, let's see, Marvel released their big news concerning Secret Wars. So this is their next big event, if you will, coming this spring and summer. And it's basically Crisis on Infinite Earths for the Marvel Universe. So they're taking the 616 Marvel Universe, the Ultimate Marvel Universe, and I believe the 2099 Future Marvel Universe. And who knows if they're going to throw in a bunch of other ones. I kind of think they will. And they're going to combine them into one unified Marvel Universe. So, a lot of people out there are probably, making comments about, how Marvel is finally copying DC. I really don't care about that. My concern is I didn't really think that DC's Crisis and the aftermath of that worked very well. I actually really like a multiverse concept in comic book universes. So just to see that Marvel is going to be doing this, it just kind of brings up those feelings I have, and I question, why does the company think they need to do this? DC did it because they'd had at that point 50 years of publishing to streamline, I guess, if you will, and present a unified universe and characters and histories. But like I said, it did not work very well from my perspective. Things just didn't work as well, I thought. For me, it's really easy to see like the World War II heroes, the Justice Society, as an Earth 2 group and not have to mesh them into the DC Universe history as being the World War II heroes, and then later the Justice League characters come out. I mean, obviously that does work. And it works very well from just a timeline standpoint. But I really like the idea of a multiverse and the different kinds of histories and stories that could be told using that device, that storytelling device. So I don't see why Marvel feels the need to do this unless, of course, it comes back to the greater plan. A lot of people have been talking about this online, but maybe this is their way to unify the Marvel Universe to somehow fit in better with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I think is if that's true, I think it's somewhat of a short-sighted I think it's kind of short-sighted because the Marvel Cinematic Universe will change over time. It will go away eventually. I can't imagine that we're going, even though these movies between Marvel and DC have been announced and we're out in the 2020 and probably beyond. Eventually, they won't be making these movies or as many movies anymore because the climate will change. People's interest in these movies will begin to fade, and there won't be as much interest, so they won't go, so they won't make them. It's just as simple as that. Hopefully, comics will continue because they don't need to be tied to the movies or the TV shows in order to keep people interested in these characters and the universes, etc. Anyway, besides all that, besides my own opinion about the multiverse and combining multiverses into one unified verse, it does bring up some interesting storytelling possibilities where you bring in some of the ultimate characters together with the normal quote unquote Marvel universe. I'm looking forward to this Secret Wars event, mostly because Jonathan Hickman is writing it. And in case you haven't been reading Hickman's Avengers, I mean, this whole idea of the multiverse and the crisis-like qualities of the story has been going on ever since he came onto the books. And it's been building to this for a long time now, and it's been a wonderful read. Being someone who, let's see, Crisis came in 1985. I started reading comics a few years before that, so it's kind of neat to see, Marvel's take on that. And that's one of the things I like about Marvel and DC is that they play off of each other all the time. Sometimes it's presented in a not so flattering way, and other times it's just fun for the fans. And I think this is one of those fun things. Regardless of why they're doing it, the comparisons to DC notwithstanding, I think it'll be an interesting time for Marvel Comics and what they're going to do going forward. And one of those things, of course, is the just announced, as I'm recording this episode, A-Force, which is apparently a team of Avengers, which are all female characters. So, that could be interesting. I'm sure there will be plenty of other announcements in the coming weeks and months as we get closer to Secret Wars and what comes after that. Marvel, just in general, has had, I think, a really nice creative surge, with their all new Marvel and all new Marvel Now and all that stuff. However they want to brand it doesn't really matter. What they've done is that they've come out with a lot of interesting and compelling books over the last several years. And as a longtime fan of DC Comics in general, I have experienced the New 52 and found it a little wanting, probably more than a little. And so I've been hoping that DC would at least look at the response from the readership of Marvel Comics and their efforts and go, you know what, something is working over there. People are reacting in a positive way, and they're not doing that as much here. So maybe we should try to do things a little differently. And it appears that DC is going to do exactly that. And so we've known for a while now that DC would be doing this convergence event to coincide with the move of the corporate offices to California from New York. And so for 2 months, they're doing Convergence. There's that limited series. And then they're also doing a bunch of 2-issue miniseries, which is just kind of weird that they're doing it this way. But they're showcasing a bunch of different eras of the DC universe. So there's going to be some pre-Flashpoint stuff, some pre-Crisis stuff. I'm sure there's a bunch of other things. I need to look at the latest issue of previews to figure out all the titles, at least for the ones that are being solicited for the month of April, which ones I'm going to get. But I imagine that between April and May, my comic book buying is going to shoot right up in terms of how much I'm going to spend. I imagine the same will happen with Marvel once we get out of the Secret Wars event timeframe. Anyway, so DC has that event, and then what they're going to do after that, so they just announced, again, as at the time of this recording, they just announced their post-convergence plans, which includes, let's see, I think it's like 25 new books, some of which are just continuations. Continuations of characters, but it's a new title. Like the Constantine book that is being published right now is going to stop, and we're going to get a Constantine Hellblazer comic, for example. And so those will start up in June. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. It's 25 ongoing series. So the current slate of comics, there are 25 of those that are going to continue on, and then we're going to get a bunch of new ones. So the new ones, there are 24. So that brings the total up to 49. So the New 52 moniker is going away finally. Ever since basically after the first year of the New 52, I've been wondering when DC is just going to drop that marketing phrase. But here we are. We're going to have 49 titles from DC starting in June. I'm just going to run through these real quick. Batman Beyond. This is from Dan Jurgens and Bernard Chang on art. I've never been a big Batman Beyond fan. For some reason, when the cartoon was out, I couldn't get that channel, or I didn't have that channel or something. I don't know. And then finally, when I was able to watch it, it was already well into the series, and I never got back into watching it. I've always intended to go back and see where it's being streamed right now, and then catch up on it. So it doesn't have the draw for me. Plus, it's yet another Batman comic. I'm sure it'll be fine. Black Canary is another one. This is written by Brendan Fletcher, with art by Annie Wu and Irene Coe. And there's been a preview image of Black Canary. Apparently, she's going to be part of a band. Reminds me of what's going on in the current Batgirl comic. So apparently, they're laying the seeds for that. The aforementioned Constantine the Hellblazer, that's the actual title. This is written by Ming Doyle and James Tynion IV, with art by Riley Rosmo, which that's a good pairing art style wise and with the character. So it's interesting. Are they going to do more of the Hellblazer style of Constantine instead of the Constantine that we have been getting in the current comic book? Be interesting. Cyborg, a new Cyborg series, which is written by David Walker, who I believe is currently writing the Shaft comic book for, I don't even know, with art by Ivan Reis. So I will, okay, it's Cyborg, New Teen Titans. I love the New Teen Titans. Cyborg has always been one of my favorite characters from that series. And I enjoyed the fact that he became part of the Justice League in the New 52 relaunch, although they haven't really done much with him in that series for the last, what are we at, almost 40 issues at this point. Anyway, so Cyborg will get to shine. And there's a great preview image of some pencils by Ivan Reis that just looks phenomenal. I love Ivan Reis's work. He's great. So I'll probably be getting that. Dark Universe, written by James Tynion IV, with art by Ming Doyle. Well, these guys are going to be busy, aren't they? I assume that's kind of like that fills the niche for the Justice League Dark series that's not continuing. Green Lantern Lost Army, written by Colin Bunn, art by Jesus Saiz, and I want to say Javi Pina. Hope that's correct. Jesus Saiz's art, again, I love his art. Lost Army, that's an interesting subtitle. I wonder what that's all about. Then we get Doomed written by Scott Lobdell with art by Javier Fernandez. I don't know anything about that. Earth 2 Society, written by Daniel Wilson, art by Jorge Jimenez. So here we go, back to the multiverse thing. I'm so glad to see that they're going to continue on with the Earth 2 concept they started as I believe that Earth 2, the comic that we currently have, was the part of the second wave of the New 52, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong about that. Anyway, I really liked that book when it first came out. I've not been so enamored with it since then, given its ties to the World's End series that's going on right now. Anyway, this is interesting. Dr. Fate will have his own book. This is written by Paul Levitz with art by Sunny Liu. So Dr. Fate, I've always enjoyed Dr. Fate in general, and then when they brought the New 52 version of Dr. Fate into the Earth 2 series with a wonderful costume design that they did, and while they haven't really done much with the character in the book, again like Cyborg in Justice League, you have this character who basically was driven insane by the helmet of fate. So I'm really curious to see the focus on this character and what they're going to do with him. Brian Hitch returns to the Justice League of America, so we get another JLA comic. Hopefully this one will last longer than the previous versions. But this time Mr. Hitch is writing and drawing it. So, Hitch doing the drawing work on the book is going to be a big enough draw as it is. But him writing it as well, that'll be interesting. The Keith Giffen Justice League 3001 will continue, I believe, that Justice League 3000 series. Art by Howard Porter. Interesting, some of the solo books that we're getting here. Martian Manhunter by Rob Williams and Ben Oliver on art. I might have to take a look at that. And then we have Midnighter, written by Steve Orlando. Interesting. Art by, it says here, the thing I'm looking at is ACO. I don't know what that means. Mystic U, written by Alyssa Quitney. Artist I don't think has been announced, at least from the website that I'm looking at. Omega Men, that's an interesting team concept to bring into this New 52 DC. Well, I can't say New 52 anymore. What can I say? This new DCU, or newer DCU. This is written by Tom King from Grayson, which means I probably will have to check this out because Tom King is making a very big impression on me in terms of his writing in Grayson. This with art by Barnaby Bagenda. Not familiar with that artist. Here's some interesting choices, some of these in the next group. That old doll-like character Prez. So this is written by Mark Russell and art by Ben Caldwell. Prez has always been one of those kind of quirky concepts that never really work. So it's interesting that they're going to try this out. But, I'm glad to see that they're trying new things. Not new, but it's a new version. Red Hood / Arsenal. So instead of Red Hood and the Outlaws, it's just those two. I guess it's going to be one of those buddy superhero concepts, I guess. Written by Scott Lobdell and art by Dennis Medry. We are losing, unfortunately, the fantastic Batman and Robin series, but we do get a Robin, Son of Batman, written and drawn by Patrick Gleason. So that'll be interesting again to see Mr. Gleason taking on the writing chores. But I'm so going to miss that team of Peter Tomasi and Patrick Gleason doing Batman and Robin. One of the former Outlaws, Starfire, is getting her own solo series. A lot of solo series here in this new lineup. This is written by Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor with art by Emanuela Lupacino. And the preview image I saw of Starfire, with Amanda Connor doing the art there, makes her look a lot less, how do I want to say, sexed up. So I'm glad to see that they're making some changes with that character. I'm assuming anyway. I got excited about this next one just because of the title, We Are Robin. But I knew nothing about it until I was looking online today for this recording. This is written by Lee Berhamo with art by Carrie Randolph. And the preview image I saw is just a bunch of characters, it looks like normal people, normal being, non-superhero, just, non-powered people anyway. But they're all wearing, either capes or jackets or hoodies. But they've got these stylized R's on them, and they're just kind of jumping around. So I was thinking at first that this would be focused on the various Robins, and to me that would be an interesting book as it is. Whether they're current Robins or past Robins, just think of the storytelling possibilities here, jumping back to the past to tell an old Dick Grayson Robin story, or a Red Robin story, or whatever. Doesn't matter. Fill in the gaps there with within those 5 years since the Superman premiered in the DCU, and Batman had like 5 Robins. So I was excited about that possibility, but now I'm seeing this. I'm wondering, wow, this is not what I thought it was, and I'm still intrigued, but I'm wondering what this book is about. And then we have some miniseries that also have been announced. Batmite, written by Dan Jurgens with art by Corin Howell. No thank you. Batmite's never been a character that I've cared about. Bizarro, written by Heath Corson, art by Gustavo Duarte. Again, I like a good Bizarro story as it relates to Superman, but I don't know. We'll just have to see. Harley Quinn / Power Girl, again written by Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor with art by Stefan Roux. That might be kind of fun. And Section 8, which features characters from the, I believe, well-loved Hitman series from years ago. This is written by Garth Ennis. So Garth Ennis comes back to DC Comics with art by John McCrae. I never got into the Hitman stuff, but I know that it's very popular. And like I said, there are 25 titles that will continue. Action Comics, Aquaman, Batgirl, Batman, Detective Comics, Batman / Superman, Catwoman, Deathstroke, The Flash, Gotham Academy, Gotham by Midnight, Grayson, Green Arrow, Green Lantern, Harley Quinn, Justice League, Lobo, Secret Six, Sinestro, The New Suicide Squad, Superman / Wonder Woman, Teen Titans, Wonder Woman, and Justice League United. Now, some of these have the current creative teams. Some of them have some different people involved. So there you go. That's the look at the books coming out post-convergence at DC Comics. I did want to just comment here. There's a quote here from Dan DiDio. Yeah, here we go. So in this new era of storytelling, story will trump continuity as we continue to empower creators to tell the best stories in the industry, from Dan DiDio. This sounds really great. This is exactly what they should have been doing all along since the New 52 relaunch, and I don't think they were doing that. I think they thought they were doing it, and in some cases they were, obviously, but for the most part, it felt more like there was a lot more editorial control. And I think a lot of the departures of creators and other people from DC Comics during the last 3 years or so demonstrates that as well. So hopefully they've learned their lesson, and as much as it pains me to say that they've learned from Marvel, that if you allow your creators some artistic freedom, that they will tell some compelling and entertaining stories, and that will draw people in. So I'm very hopeful. We'll see how that goes. I do want to also just kind of talk about the story will trump continuity. I know that a lot of comic book creators out there think that continuity is just a killer, and that you can't, if you get too bogged down in continuity, that kills the story. And as someone who used to write, and hopefully this year I will get back into that, I totally understand it. It makes total sense. But as a comic book fan, to hear people like DiDio and others talk about how continuity is the bad guy, if you will, in comics, I kind of bristle at that, because that's one thing I love about comics, in the DC and Marvel comics especially, is I love that continuity. Even after we get so many reboots, universe reboots from DC, and that's coming up. I mean, we've had reboot-ish type stuff happening in Marvel over the years, and now we're going to get what appears to be a straight up reboot in their universe coming up this summer. So, but despite all that, I still like the continuity that we get, and so, like with what they've done with Batgirl recently, where from a creative standpoint, it was great that they did that, and a lot of people reacted very positively to that. But that is not the Batgirl that we have seen since the New 52 relaunch. So it's almost like that Batgirl story, and maybe that's why DC decided to do this more across their line. But it doesn't seem like the same. Like I said, the same Batgirl, but it worked creatively, and people who are reading the comic just are really, like I said, responding positively. So while I see the need from a creative standpoint, it just, again, as a fan, I just kind of hurts inside a little bit to hear things like story will trump continuity. But as a fan, at the same time, I know I'm being wishy-washy here, but it's just like, it makes total sense. I just wish continuity I wish there was a way that story and continuity could, play in the sandbox together, and everybody's all lovey-dovey and everything works. That's my wish. Speaking of lovey-dovey, let's talk about, for this Valentine's 2015, some of my favorite comic book couples. These are in no particular order. There were a lot of other comic book couples that were on my list, but I only decided to focus on the top 10. I might mention some of the other ones just for fun. These are in no particular order. I'll just start off here with the Scarlet Witch and Vision. So back in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, when I started reading comics, one of my very first comics was Avengers number 177, which was the end of the Korvac saga. And, I think that was my introduction to the Vision. I can't remember if Scarlet Witch was in that story or not now, but there's the Vision. There's this red skinned guy in a green and yellow suit, and he's an android, or what did he call himself? A synthezoid. How Stan Lee likes to, and just the Marvel folks like to play around with these words, these concepts. The power cosmic instead of cosmic power. That's one of the fun things about the Marvel universe. Anyway, the synthezoid that is the Vision. And then, reading on, and as time went on, I found out that the Vision and Scarlet Witch were a couple, and they eventually married and had children, and then didn't have children, as you found out in, I found out about it in the Avengers Disassembled story. But I did get the miniseries from 1982 called The Vision and the Scarlet Witch, and it's just something that has remained in my collection these past years. And it's just kind of one of my favorite miniseries that I had purchased over the years. Because of these characters. I just like the idea of this artificial man who developed feelings, became more human. So it's basically the sort of the Data story from Star Trek: The Next Generation, only the Vision went even further than Data in his quest to become more human, I guess. more interestingly, and I don't think that the storytellers over the years really delved into this enough, but in my own personal continuity, just that the idea of this woman falling in love with this artificial man and then them building a life together, I just really like that idea. And a lot of these things I'm going to talk about are going to be, just from my personal experiences with these characters, and not necessarily having to do with their current continuities. There's that word again. So just bear that in mind. Speaking of that, next on my list is Black Canary and Green Arrow, and I'm thinking of the satellite era longbow hunters type relationship between those two characters. Ollie Green Arrow, is this kind of outspoken, loudmouth, brash kind of guy who ends up snaring, and I mean that in the best positive light. He becomes involved with the Black Canary, which is this kick-ass, interesting woman, and they just work. Their relationship just works. She sees through that kind of that facade that Green Arrow has, and he's totally head over heels in love with this woman. So I've just always liked those two together. Next is Midnighter and Apollo. So I read a lot of Stormwatch and Authority in trades over the years, and one of the interesting things in those stories is this relationship between these two men. And specifically, and of course, the writer and the storytellers at the time were just kind of playing off the whole idea, what if Superman and Batman were lovers, that kind of a thing. But what made this work was this examination of these two men and their relationship, more for me personally, from the perspective of how Midnighter just dotes on Apollo. So whenever they go on a mission and Apollo, is getting hurt or expending too much energy, Midnighter is right there just saying, "Hey, dude, take it easy. I don't want to lose you." That kind of stuff. And I just remember reading in some of those stories, just Midnighter is just really in love with this guy, and I really like that idea. I wish they would show more same-sex couples, having a relationship in comics. I mean, it's such a prevalent part of American culture, at least, if not beyond that. And we've had lots of breakthroughs in just mass media, on television and in film. So, why comics should follow suit, I guess, is my point. Next up is Clark Kent and Lois Lane, and I mean that specifically, Clark Kent, not Superman and Lois Lane. I never cared for, like the 50s and 60s where Lois Lane is always pursuing Superman and trying to get him to marry her and all that stuff. I never cared for those stories at all. But I believe it was the 90s, when they got Clark Kent and Lois Lane together, and Clark told Lois that he was Superman, and they ended up getting married, that's when it became interesting to me. So over the years, that whole relationship developed, and Lois Lane became Clark's accomplice, or Superman's accomplice, I guess, either way. But I just really enjoyed seeing those two interact together as a married couple. Growing up, of course, the idea of marriage was just like this foreign concept to me. And of course, having these superheroes that I were reading about that were not married made total sense to me. But as I got older and I fell in love and got married, again, kind of like what I was talking about with the same-sex couples, I wish that I could see more married couples in comics, because that's where I was in my life, so it made sense for me to want to see that in my entertainment as well. And so when I saw that with Clark Kent and Lois Lane, I really responded to that, and I really liked their relationship. And I was kind of sad to see that over with the New 52 relaunch, but that opened up the door for some other things that I'll talk about in a little bit. Speaking of married couples, there's another on this list, Reed and Sue Richards. So I've never really been a big Fantastic Four fan. I've read stories here and there, but just for some reason those characters, that concept never really did much for me until I read the Jonathan Hickman written Fantastic Four stories from a few years ago. And in that, and in reading those stories, I just loved mostly Sue. I have to admit, it's mostly that I have a crush on Sue Richards. But I really like this odd relationship between Sue and Reed, where, they love each other, they have children together. They don't always agree with each other, which that's probably the thing that I like the most, is that they have these differences of opinion, but things still work out between them. And that's what a marriage really is about, at least to me. So, for example, during the Marvel Civil War, you had those two characters at odds with each other. And there's these great scenes in that story where I'm thinking specifically, there's a scene where the narration is from Sue, and she's talking about how she made this lovely dinner for Reed, and they make love, but that's the last that she sees of him for a while, because she leaves him because of this rift, because Reed took Tony Stark's side with the whole superhero registration thing, and she did not agree with that, and she fought against her own husband. But she did so because she felt that by doing so, she was improving things for everyone involved, including him, including Reed. And Reed is just, this total intellectual who often doesn't get emotion, or is so far, he's so advanced in his thinking that common courtesy sometimes eludes him. He takes Sue for granted. But in the end, when the chips are down, he loves his wife and will do anything for her. So I just really like that concept with those two. Let's see. Next is Batman and okay. So with Batman, I could probably do a whole episode on different, the top 5 Batman couples, I guess, because he's had so many lovers over the years. But I chose, out of all those many people, women that Batman has been with, I chose Batman and Talia al Ghul. And the Talia that I'm referring to is not the one that we've seen in the New 52. That Talia is not my Talia. That Talia is crazy and vindictive and not loving. But the Talia that I'm thinking of is the one that Batman met when Ra's al Ghul first came onto the scene. This is the Talia that Batman had a child with, although he didn't know about it until Grant Morrison decided to bring in Damian. And up until that point, I believe that story, what is it, the Bride of the Demon, I think is the name of that story. I think that was considered out of continuity until, of course, Grant Morrison brought in Damian, like I said. Anyway, so I always thought that Talia was more or less Batman's equal, and that's why I chose her over, say, Catwoman. Although Catwoman can be, I guess you could consider her Batman's equal as well. But for some reason, in my mind, Talia is more of a good partner for Batman. I'm not entirely sure why. I didn't really think about that as I went into recording this. But for some reason, I feel this, so it must be true if I want to borrow from Stephen Colbert and his whole idea of truthiness. Anyway, wow, I'm getting off topic here. So I just really like those two together. Batman always feels comfortable around her, or did, despite the fact that her father is always trying to take over the world and stop Batman. Talia would almost always side with Batman whenever the chips were down. I just love how she calls him beloved all the time, which I'm sure that Batman, that just irks Batman. I know it. I have to think that it does. It just irks him, but he never says anything. He just accepts it. he accepts it, and which to me that's one reason why I think that Batman loves Talia. Next up, and this is going to be kind of a weird one as well, is Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy. So back to like I said before, Avengers 177 was one of the very first comics that I picked up. Well, one of the very first comics. Well, there were three comics that I consider the start of my comic book collecting. It was Avengers 177. It was Amazing Spider-Man, I think 187, which has nothing to do with this concept or this theme, but this one does. This is Marvel Tales number 98, which is a reprint of Amazing Spider-Man. I want to say 121, The Death of Gwen Stacy. So that was my very first exposure to Gwen Stacy, was her death. But since then, I had read many different reprints of Spider-Man comics, and I saw Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy together. And I know a lot of people think that it should be Peter Parker and the redheaded chick, but for some reason, it's kind of like Archie and Betty and Veronica. I've just always been a Gwen supporter as opposed to a Mary Jane supporter. And by the way, it's Archie and Betty, not Veronica. So, like I said, this is kind of a weird one for that reason, but I actually haven't read a lot of Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy stories, and I read an article not too long ago pointing out that Gwen Stacy was kind of not the best girlfriend that Peter had, but for some reason, I don't know. Maybe it's the way that Gil Kane and John Romita drew her in the comics that I read. She's just a beautiful character. She's blonde. I'm kind of partial to blondes. I mentioned how Sue Richards, I have a crush on her. It's that sort of thing. Anyway, doesn't matter. I gotta stop going off on these tangents. Anyway, I have amassed 4 of the essential Spider-Man black and white collections, and primarily so that I can read about the developing relationship between Peter and Gwen, and then what happens after Gwen Stacy died, and how Peter and Mary Jane became a couple after that. So I'm really looking forward to reading those comics. Much like his mentor, Dick Grayson has also had quite a few love interests over the years. But for me, it's always been Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon, whom I thought were a good couple together. There was a point where Dick Grayson had proposed to Barbara. That, of course, did not last, but I was hopeful that they would actually get married, and I could see that kind of a relationship develop. Because they were costume adventurers together, and then eventually they developed a relationship. But then things didn't work out, as is often the case, because as you know, from DC Comics, folks at DC Comics, you can't have a happy couple together. Anyway, but Dick got together with Starfire, of course, the new Teen Titans. That relationship was always interesting to read about, but for me, it was always I always wanted to have Dick and Barbara get together and get married and go through life together like that. So maybe eventually I'll see that if I stick around long enough reading comics. I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to include include again a person that is already on this list, but and I know this is probably not going to be very popular with a lot of people, but my next couple is Superman and Wonder Woman. I know there are a lot of people out there, maybe you included, who think that getting Superman and Wonder Woman together, as DC did recently, is just a total bad idea. I, however, have enjoyed the idea and the comic book, Superman, Wonder Woman. Although, really, don't you think it should be called Wonder Woman, Superman? I think so. But I really enjoyed the examination of their relationship together. I mean, it makes total sense in the way that the New 52 has been shown to us in terms of the relationships of some of these characters. That the world's most powerful man and the world's most powerful woman, develop feelings for each other over the last 5 years or so, and they get together. I think that it's a very logical step in their relationship, and especially the way that Charles Soule portrayed the two and their relationship in the beginning of the Superman Wonder Woman comic just made total sense to me, and I really wish that we could have gotten more of that. Unfortunately, the whole Superman Doomed storyline got in the way, and then Charles Soule went over to Marvel. It's with Peter Tomasi coming on. I've only read one issue at this point of that comic with Peter Tomasi writing that relationship, but it seems to be in good hands, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next. Now, I really hope that eventually Superman and Lois Lane get together, but only because, that's just tradition. But again, story should trump continuity, right? So I need to let go of some of those fanboy bedrocks, if you will, in comics. This being one of them. We don't have to have Superman and Lois Lane together, but I secretly want that to happen eventually. And of course, Superman and Wonder Woman should remain good friends. Because I would not want to be Superman if I did something to screw up that relationship between Diana and him. So anyway, let's see. Finally on my list is a non-DC, non-Marvel pairing, and that is Kachu and Francine from Terry Moore's wonderful epic Strangers in Paradise. Those two, they're best friends. Kachu ends up falling in love with Francine. Francine loves Kachu, but not in that way, at least not in the beginning. It's just that whole examination. I mean, that whole story is about these two characters and everything that surrounds them. And in fact, you can even throw in a trio in this relationship if you include David as well. But it's really Kachu and Francine, and just it's hard to describe unless you read Strangers in Paradise. Just that development of that relationship and how much they really do love each other. They don't do the couple thing, sexually. Until late in the series, if I recall correctly. It's just a really cool relationship. And it's different from just about every other couple on here in the way that it's developed and the way the things that end up between them. I just really, Terry Moore did a really, 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 really good job at portraying those two characters and their love for each other. And I can't recommend it enough. So if you haven't read Strangers in Paradise, you really should go seek out the trades. There's an omnibus, I think, as well that you can get. Just go get it and read about this wonderful couple. Anyway, so there you go. Those are my top 10 favorite, I guess, comic book couples. As with any list, over time that things will change. If I ever come back to this idea, I'm sure that I will pick others. I had on my list, like I mentioned, Archie and Betty. There's Booster Gold and Blue Beetle. Just their friendship, I really enjoyed them. Let's see here, Kitty Pryde and Colossus. I should have included this for just controversy's sake, but Cyclops and Emma Frost. No, not Jean Grey. I said Emma Frost. I like those two together. Ralph and Sue Dibney, the whole Roy Harper and Cheshire relationship, which was just kind of out of the blue, but they developed that over the years. It was an interesting thing. Hawkman and Hawkwoman, Black Panther and Storm. Although I have to say, I knew that Black Panther and Storm were together, but I never read any comics where they were shown together. So I didn't have anything to say about that, but I like the idea of these two characters, an Avenger and an X-Men getting together. And I understand that there was some people thought that the whole relationship seemed forced, but I just like the idea. Anyway, those were a bunch of the other ones on my list. There's a few more, but I'm not going to go into those. Maybe I'll come back to this some other Valentine's Day. So who are your favorite comic book couples? I would love to hear from you to find out what those are, or if you just think I'm totally off my rocker and I chose the wrong pairing. You could always let me know by emailing me at longboxreview@gmail.com, or you can go to the website longboxreview.com and click on the contact tab, and there's a myriad ways in which you can get a hold of me. Despite the fact that I do not like Valentine's Day and totally think it's a made-up construct, I hope that your Valentine's Day is wonderful with you and your significant other, whether it be a romantic relationship or just a really good friendship with someone. Anyway, have a wonderful holiday, if you will, and I will talk to you again in the near future. Thanks for listening, everybody.